Thank you very much for this opportunity. I would like to welcome you all. It's a pleasure to present to such a valuable audience, and on behalf of myself and my bank, I would like to thank you all, and thanks Atfiyah for this wonderful organization. Let me share the presentation. Can you see it?
Yes, clearly seen.
Very good. So, all right. I'm representing Development and Investment Bank of Turkey, a publicly owned by the Ministry of Treasury and Finance, in fact, publicly owned development and investment bank. Well, I mean, a few words on the pandemic. The previous speakers mentioned a lot of it. Of course, COVID-19 caused a lot of health-related issues, had a death toll of millions of people. But it's not only that. I mean, the effects which are referred to by IMF President or MD, Managing Director, Kristalina Georgieva, at her recent opening speech at IMF, was mentioning three other matters. Those were definitely divergence of economic growth across the countries, second, divergence of inflation across the countries, and divergence of global public debt across the countries. The mentioning was making a reference to the wide gaps between the emerging markets, developing countries, as well as the developed part of the world. And unfortunately, developing countries took the lion's share in terms of negative impacts of the crisis. And this will be very difficult to recover, and we have to try hard. An integrated and collaborative approach will be required, as well as full determination and probably calibrated policies varying across the countries. But the good news is that the global economy is showing some signs of recovery in terms of growth, and similar situation in the case of Turkey. Turkey, after scaling back, economy scaling back in the first half of 2020, came back with some strong growth in the third quarter of 2020, and a record growth, which represents the strong comeback in 2021, the second quarter of this year, with 21.7% growth rate. Well, but that doesn't mean that the COVID is over, nor the effects and negative impacts are over. And it's during those times that the responsibilities of the development banks in the country are increasing. The weight on our shoulders are getting heavier. Being aware of all these increasing responsibilities and the long list of things that we have to do. Our bank, TKYB in short, I will refer to as TKYB in short, but Development and Investment Bank of Turkey, has tried to secure as much liquidity as possible from external markets to be able to avail to the customers and investors on the asset side of the balance sheet. So funds borrowed grew by 17%, and compared to the market, it was one of the leading banks among the Turkish banks to obtain such a high amount of funding during the year. And that was, of course, reflected to the increase in loans by the same amount, almost 20%. Well, of course, our history, when we look at our history, we see that the bank was born in 1975, was established in 1975 as laborers' investment bank. Primary function was different then, and several important things and milestones happened and can be mentioned during the history of the bank. Like in 1989, the merger of the bank with Tourism Bank locally in Turkey, and IPO in 1991. But more recently, what's more critical, what is particularly important, was the change in law in 2018, which allowed or triggered the restructuring of the bank and establishment of the Turkey Development Fund, enlargement of the bank's investment banking activities alongside traditional development banking. So, I mean, starting from 2018, the big transformation of the bank started. And Surprisingly, that overlaps with the COVID-19 period, but that didn't slow down the transformation process at the bank. Transformation triggered the rebranding of the bank, renaming of the bank. Used to be Development Bank, now Development and Investment Bank, and relocation of the bank from the capital city, Ankara, to the financial city, Istanbul. Restaffing definitely followed. The establishment of Turkey Development Fund was an end result, as well as the banks obtaining approval from the İSPAŞ area board for Murabaha financing. Several important things happened, but the bank turned itself into more agile and dynamic organization, and that helped a lot in COVID response as well. Now it's a 46-year-old, we call it, new bank. Our mission and vision, I guess, the past 2 years, which were critical and difficult in terms of COVID, confirmed the validity of our mission once again and highlighted the importance of sustainability, which appears in our mission and vision in several places, as well as it highlighted this pandemic and difficult period, highlighted the importance and validity of the fight with environmental, social, and economic impacts, negative impacts of climate change, of unfair distribution of capital, and of unemployment. So our mission is to contribute to the structural transformation and fair capital distribution in Turkey, and having sustainable development priorities in mind. We would like to underline and emphasize a couple of things in our mission while doing our business, and we very strictly follow those guidelines during these periods as well. Financial inclusion, sustainable economic development, and impact and value creation. When it comes to vision, we are at the side of any investors in strategic areas, investors in difficult regions. We are supporting them with our facilities, with our know-how, and this is our vision to ensure the sustainable economic development of the country and to add value to the futures. Traditional development banking activities of TKYB requires, and the bank has played a very pivotal role in making available to companies making investments in Turkey and strategic areas in important regions, by making available some medium and long-term liquidity to them. The bank provided the continuity, and despite the COVID-19 crisis. The main aim, of course, is to boost unemployment and to eliminate any regional disparities and to increase the prosperity across Turkey. And of course, with the enlarged investment banking activities, the aim of the bank, and it acted accordingly, was to enhance Turkish capital markets to the level of international capital markets and ultimately attract more foreign capital inflows to the country. With that in mind, the bank provided advisory services in IPOs, M&As, buy side, sell side, and for debt structuring in general, and with one thing in mind, definitely to provide solutions to the customers, which was much needed, especially during the times of volatility, during the times of COVID. And of course, the bank established the umbrella fund, Turkey Development Fund, under which it did not provide debt this time, but equity, and it continues to provide venture capital investments and private equity investments into different companies, especially in technology area, in SME area. We'll see another page While doing all this, while following its strategic guidelines, the bank did not leave aside or did not forget about digitalization. It completed its digital transformation as well, which is much needed. And while creating corporate structures and processes, and it tried to ensure that operational efficiency and productivity was achieved in all these areas. So alongside traditional development banking activities, top-notch investment banking products were made available to customers. And the bank, in addition to the thematic loans that it normally provides to the market, it dispersed loans under central bank's investment support loan program, which is basically targeting at projects in industries with high export potential in order to cut reliance of the country on imports. And of course, one thing is clear, regional development is a priority for us. Therefore, our bank TKYB continues to provide long-term financial support to critical or difficult regions, fifth and sixth regions as defined in the economic program, which requires a lot of expertise to do business in. And the bank has built up that expertise, luckily, along the time over the course of many years. And of course, several firsts were introduced by TKYB to the market. In 2020, the bank acted as exclusive financial advisor for several companies in energy, agriculture, and many sectors for their initial debut Sukuk issuances. In 2021, the bank was the exclusive financial advisory provider for Turkey's first transition bond issuance. And very recently, a couple of weeks ago, the bank issued the first social Sukuk transaction in Turkish lira in Turkey. Under the Turkey Development Fund, the umbrella fund I mentioned earlier, the sub-funds, Regional Development Fund, Technology and Innovation Fund, Innovative and Advanced Technologies Fund, and the Participation Fund are four sub-funds. And as you can see, the main target or priority is to support the mainly startup ecosystem and SMEs. The bank already had an experience as an investor in a couple of funds, the names of which are at the bottom, EFG Fund and 212. But the bank now is the manager of these funds, co-funded by, for example, the Ministry of Industry and Technology in Turkey as well, and some participation funds, banks. And it's important because that means providing equity, especially for critical sectors, SME sectors, like manufacturing, like, agriculture, like renewable industry or health, and critical sector of technology for the startup ecosystem, which is very important for the future of the country. Despite the pandemic, TKYB displayed a very stellar performance, I could say, especially on the asset side by increasing its asset book and growing its loan book by lending more as a support to companies, and on the liability side, of course, with the match funding and increase of funding for many purposes. But as you can see in the pie chart, the COVID-19 response, funding took up 12% of our normal funds borrowed, and employment purpose funds took up 8%. I'll share more details. And our bank plays a major role in renewable energy investments because we believe that's very critical for climate, for sustainable economic growth. And almost 55% of our loan book is representing or investments for renewable energy. And then this is followed by banks, manufacturing industry, leasing companies, as well as tourism, and that goes on. But you might be surprised with banks and leasing companies. This is under the apex role of our bank, and I'll share another slide with you in the coming pages to tell you more about it. But with the renewable investments, the bank, probably led to, or the bank enabled the reduction of 3.5 million tons of CO2 emission with all the renewable energy projects that we have financed. And we keep this as a good KPI for ourselves and calculate it regularly. I mentioned earlier that the bank relied very much on the funds coming from the development finance institutions. And between 2004 and 2018, for 14 years, the total borrowing was around $3 billion from the development finance institutions. But only during the transformation period of the bank, between 2018 until today, the bank has obtained additional $2 billion funding. So that by itself is a proof of how much we have focused on having access to as much liquidity as we can, so that we can find a remedy and solution to the liquidity sector.
Two types of taps. One.
I guess that wasn't a question, so I'm continuing. I would like to mention three projects here, three projects that we have very recently finalized because they were referring to COVID and, as a solution to the current environmental problems. And all of them that you will see on this page are allowing Apex lending. In Apex lending, we're not only lenders, as TKYB is not the only lender to the market. These loans can be lent through other intermediaries, and these intermediaries are other banks and leasing companies that we choose and collaborate to disperse these loans. And it has several, of course, benefits to allow Apex lending. Obviously, the first one would be financial inclusion. The more the intermediaries are, the easier you can reach out to, ultimate companies, beneficiaries. The more easily you can avail the funds, so that will be timely response to emergency situations. And of course, as TKYB, our role as a development bank is to upbring the levels and standards of environment and social policies of these other lenders up to the standards of the creditor institutions like the World Bank. So the first loan is IBRD loan for formal employment creation project. Again, very much focusing on the unemployment, problem in our country, and providing a solution to companies, SMEs, large enterprises, especially operating in 24 major provinces affected by the refugee inflows. And the loan is like 316 million euros in total, and it has another grant component, which I can mention in the following page. Another facility we made available and still is in operation is $250 million emergency firm support facility for SMEs again. For SMEs which are negatively affected, obviously, by COVID-19. Who hasn't been affected from COVID-19? And the third facility is a working capital facility, shorter tenor in nature, but again, for companies which are affected from COVID, it's a COVID facility. All put together is around $1 billion worth of new facilities, just as a COVID response was made available by our bank to the market, and they are still in operation. We run two grant facilities. One is a COMSEC facility. This is for countries under the Organization of Islamic Cooperation Countries, we call them, several countries. This is a small-scale budget it has, but very good coverage and very good incentive for startups and companies having good ideas, creating impact in those countries. And the second one, again, as part of the employment creation project, a grant facility for 70 million euros, which for which the call will be opened in December. While doing all this, of course, we are very committed to environmental matters, to reduce negative environmental impact, to eliminate the unnecessary resource utilization, and to reduce waste production by our activities, while increasing positive impacts to the environment. Our bank was one of the first signatories of UNEP-FI, Principles of Responsible Banking, which has all these principles I won't go through, and which we are strictly adhering to. And also in sustainable development and responsible banking, I can talk about firsts, I can talk about many details, but in our facilities, while making available a facility to any project, our bank conducts environmental and social risk assessment for all projects, irrespective, independent of the amount. And we, with the finance projects, we directly and indirectly contribute to 13 of the 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. We, enabled 3 million tons per year carbon dioxide emission prevention, and 63% of our portfolio consists of sustainable themed loans. And we are the first state development bank to engage in voluntary reporting to carbon disclosure. We're members to integrated reporting. We're the first and only Turkish bank to become connected member of the European Investment Fund, national promotional institutions. And very recently in September, with the signature of IFC's operational principles, we became the first signatory institution out of Turkey. I can mention many firsts, and I can mention that, as a member of Global Impact Investment Network, our bank is working to establish the first impact investment fund in Turkey. So many firsts, many new things we have learned, many things that COVID-19 has taught us or has guided us, in fact. Sometimes, out of emergency, you speed up the processes, and TKYB is a very good representative or symbol of transition, transformation, and agility. We have done many things for sustainability, and we look forward to doing more for a positive impact to our society. And I would like to close here. Thank you very much for listening.